Hey, Faith, introduce you.
Hey, how are you? I'm good. How's it going?
I'm great. I'm great.
Good. What are we
So
talking about?
today we are talking about everything green.
Everything
Talking
green?
about green burial. We're talking about green funerals. We're talking about green embalming. And it's a really big issue with funeral service right now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that believe that the embalming process is not environmentally responsible.
Hmm.
There are a number of people that believe that permanent burial isn't environmentally responsible,
Hmm.
and they don't want any part of it anymore. So as a funeral director and as part of the industry, how do we work with that? Because everything that we do is completely different than what this new
Yeah.
trend is.
Hmm.
So what do you think?
Sure. I think, and it's interesting because I taught class this morning and I taught embalming class this morning. We talked about this specifically in a lot of different ways. And what the conclusion we came to was that we've got traditional funeral service over here, super green over here, and nothing in the middle.
Hmm.
So there's no middle ground. We do some things, but not others. It's like you either have to choose, you have to declare yourself traditionalist or absolute green everything, and very little exists in the middle. And it really is divisive in the industry right now. It feels divisive at least a lot of the time. And it's perplexing and surprising to me that we can't have everything in the middle too. We've got to be one or the other, it seems like.
Right. And, honestly, when I look at that, part of it is that our industry as a whole, and you know this as well as I do, we are incredibly resistant to change.
Hmm.
If you look at cremation, when cremation came in, and the amount of negative press that cremation would get from the funeral industry as well
Hmm.
as others, because everyone was convinced that cremation was the end of the funeral industry, that
They
it
still are.
just,
It's still
yeah,
happening.
yeah. But there are ways to make it work. And we've
Sure.
seen that with the cremation industry.
Yeah.
We've seen traditional cremation where you've got the full funeral service with cremation to follow.
Sure.
And using niches or columbariums or
Hmm.
things of the sort in order to have a place of final disposition for cremated
Hmm.
remains is also very big.
Yeah.
California, in fact, has a law about the disposition of cremated remains, which I have always found interesting,
Huh?
where if you're taking the cremated remains home, if they're not immediately, you know,
Yeah.
if they're not immediately inurned or buried, you have to have a plan as to what happens to those cremated remains when you die. So,
Hey.
so
So you can't have all your family members in your closet piling up anymore. I'm
well, I mean,
serious.
I suppose you could, but
I guess that could be your dispo. I'm gonna go in my aunt's closet like everybody else. I don't know.
and then after I die, I'm going to pass it down to my son, who will
Yeah.
then also keep all of our relatives in his closet.
And yeah, then when it was put him in a sterilite bin when it gets too many, and then it'll go like I did not know that about California, but I,
Yeah,
I think that's good in theory. I just, gosh, I wonder how many people actually do it. I mean, they don't have to.
I'm curious about enforcement.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
How do
Yeah,
you what do you do? I mean,
I don't think you
especially if you
can.
find maybe cremated remains that, and you and I both know this happens, that aren't labeled.
Hmm.
You don't. I mean, I could have a small urn, and I don't necessarily know if it's a keepsake urn or if it's a
Yep.
pet,
Yep.
or you don't know.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of hard to enforce, but that would be a good
That's
question for
that's
Lena.
interesting. Yeah, for sure. So when we talk about green, we always have to talk about it in context of embalming,
Sure.
because I think that many people assume and have been taught that there is no way to remove risk from traditional embalming, and it either is what it is or it's nothing. And that's not true.
No.
So tell us about that.
Well, there are a couple of different things to look at in this entire scenario. First thing that we need to think about is when the embalming process happens, a traditional embalming process, chemical reactions take place.
Mhm.
And the formaldehyde that enters the system changes.
Yeah.
It is no longer the same chemical once it's gone through the process of bonding with the protein in the system.
Mhm.
So it's really not the crisis situation that a lot of
So
people.
this idea that that, formaldehyde being put into the body is dangerous
Mhm.
is not quite accurate because the very nature of embalming and how it works inactivates the formaldehyde
Right,
within the
right.
body. But what about the risk? The
To the
risk then to
practitioner.
I'm sorry?
It is dangerous to the practitioner.
That's what yeah. So,
Yeah,
when you hear this narrative about embalming being toxic and awful, it's usually presented, at least in my experience, as a scope that it's bad for the environment.
right.
But the true risk is more on the side of to the embalmer themselves when
Mhm.
they're handling those chemicals and that. And what is the true risk in your opinion from what you know about it?
Well, as far as risk to the embalmer, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's absolutely huge. I don't think that any of us work in prep rooms that are as nice as they are on campus. So you will get to a campus environment. You will walk into the preparation room, and we've got those 15 air exchanges an hour or
Hmm.
more because that's what you need for proper ventilation to get rid of those vapors,
Hmm.
clear everything out. There are lids on every machine in the school. We've got everything stored in the proper fire safety cabinets.
Hmm.
All of that wonderfulness ceases to exist once you get into the industry.
Sure. So as a school, we're compliant because we have to be, and
Mhm.
we want to be. We want to set that example. But most funeral homes, we can be very honest and say they're not compliant with all of the different, risk reduction measures. They're just not.
Yeah.
They may have a ventilation system, but so, we do clinical embalmings as part of my program, and I can't tell you how many funeral homes cannot serve as preceptors because they have never had an exposure test,
Yeah.
ever, let alone in the past year. Their ventilation system is a fan in the window. Or, I mean, it's just
No.
the
The
measures
best.
exist to help reduce the risk, but the truth of it is that in practice, I don't want to say most, but I'd say a great many funeral homes are cutting corners or are not participating in all of the
Right.
appropriate and available risk reduction measures.
Well, and let's look at it from an owner's perspective.
Hmm.
It
Sure.
is so expensive to stay compliant,
Hmm.
extremely expensive to stay compliant.
Hmm.
And when OSHA doesn't have enough legs to enforce what they're putting forward, I think a good number of people will say,
Sure.
well, nobody's going to say anything about it, so let's
Yeah.
go ahead and just keep it status quo.
Yeah.
Most of the prep rooms that I've worked in are basement closets with a bath fan in the window, and you are
It is.
and you're lucky if they have a window.
Yeah.
Sometimes I worked in one where it was a small area, so we put a box fan in the door to pull everything out and kind of direct it toward the window in the next room, which I don't have to tell you didn't work very well. So the risk for practitioners is high. And when you look at the way some of the regulations are written, let's talk about respiration,
Hmm.
respirators and protection.
Hmm.
If one person on your staff starts to use a respirator, that triggers the effect that now everyone who has potential need for respiratory protection has to have that available.
Yeah.
That's not the case if no one else is using it.
Right.
But the
Sure.
second one person starts to use it,
You have to have it
everyone else has
available.
to have it.
Yeah.
And most owners will look at that and go, you, sir, are more trouble than you're worth. See ya.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's still, I mean, people, we've gone to mortuary school. Many of us have advanced science degrees as well, and we still can't really agree on what it is and isn't.
Mhm.
And I think that what it all boils down to, at least for me, is that there is risk in exposing yourself to formaldehyde day in and day out,
Mhm.
but measures exist to reduce that as much as possible. And much of the risk comes from people not taking advantage of or using the measures that exist to reduce the risk.
Absolutely. And work practice controls,
Right.
work practice controls,
Mm-hmm.
work practice controls.
Mm-hmm.
Put the lid on your embalming machine. For the love
Yep.
of all that's holy. There
Yeah.
you put the lid on the embalming machine.
Yeah.
Do what, like if your cavity fluid injector is leaking, which if you're still using the if you're still using the statue of
We're all doing this, yeah, right. Get the
limitations,
pistol grip, like just
right,
spend the
like get
money.
a pistol grip
Yeah.
one, they work a lot better, but almost all of them leak and you end up with
Sure.
cavity fluid going down your arm as you're
Sure.
trying to embalm. And our personal protective equipment is not designed to stand up to the phenol content that's in a lot of
Oh,
the cavity fluid.
sure.
And that's the reason that most cavity fluid can't go through a machine, is because of that phenol content, which
Mm-hmm.
melts everything.
Yep.
We are in a lot of danger as practitioners. So it is a big
Yeah.
consideration.
We are in danger, and there are things we can do to mitigate it, and it's our choice, I feel like. Sometimes, we can't choose if if our employer is using proper ventilation. We can't choose if they refuse to do the exposure testing. We can't choose if some things are out of our control as practitioners, because we have to rely on the employers to care enough about it to make sure that those things are in place. But for ourselves, we can be sure that we are wearing our PPE, which over time, as well as I do, you stop with one piece of it because it's time consuming. And then the next thing you know,
Yeah.
you're just in an apron.
Yeah.
You got nothing,
Let me actually just interject here.
Mm-hmm.
Use disposable personal protective equipment, please. These gowns that everyone decides are wonderful and lovely because they're wax coated in the front. Yeah, those have an expiration date too, and most people don't realize this. You can wash those X number of times before they are considered to be ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
That it's right on the label. It says you can wash this X number of
Yeah.
times, and then it's no good.
Yeah.
They keep them forever, and gosh, they're nowhere close to being as protective as disposable personal
Sure.
protective equipment.
Sure.
They're cheaper.
Yep. Exactly.
So
Yeah. So,
yeah.
it is where, respirators exist, and they're bulky and they're uncomfortable, but, I think that we can't go as far as to say there's nothing we can do about it.
Right. Right. No, I agree. I agree. But that's where green embalming
Mhm.
gets kind of cool.
Mhm.
Now, there is, Champion.
Mhm.
Champion has a green embalming
Mhm.
series of chemicals.
Yeah.
Which fair warning, I used them once. So, I haven't followed up. I haven't seen if there are improvements to these chemicals.
Mhm.
But I decided in one of my laboratory sessions, I had a student that was very passionate about green embalming.
Mhm.
I said, all right, I called Champion. I said, hey, why don't you send those over? Let me try them. Let's see how they work.
Mhm.
They are essential oil based.
Yes.
So the essential oils in the system are supposed to assist in the embalming process. The reason that works, and I put that in quotes because it does help to delay for a
Mhm.
very small period of time
Mhm.
decomposition.
Mhm.
But the reason it helps to delay decomposition really doesn't have a whole lot to do with the chemical. It has to do with the fact that you're removing the blood from the system,
Mhm.
is one of the main reasons that
Yes.
you're starting to get decomposition. And you're still doing cavity treatment too. And even though you're not adding more chemical, you're still removing all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people forget about embalming. Even embalmers over time forget that the purpose of drainage is not just to make room for arterial solution, it's to rid the body of the things that cause rapid decomposition, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so by just doing that alone, what you introduce in matters, but a big part of that, as you said, is removing what's in the body. That I think over time we go, well, we do that, we drain because we need to make room for the solution, but we forget the draining itself is part of what helps delay decomposition.
Absolutely. And when you look at it from that respect, I could be putting root beer
Yeah.
in the circulatory system and still have a relatively small window that I've pushed back that decomposition.
Yeah.
In fact, I think if you look at the history of embalming, root beer was one of the things that was attempted.
Well,
So it's like, hey, this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Try some root beer.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So the things that are on the market, they don't mimic a traditional embalming with formaldehyde and methanol. They're not the same,
No.
and you can't expect them to be the same.
And
You know,
exactly.
and
You
no,
have to-
no, you will not get the same results from a green embalming, fluid than you will from your regular embalming fluid. You just won't. They're not the same.
No. And your prep room will smell like vanilla ham for the next 6 months.
Oh my God, they are heavily perfumed, aren't they? Oh my gosh.
Really are.
Yeah.
And it was a really weird smell afterwards, the
Oh,
combination of the body and then the very heavily perfumed fluids.
yeah.
Ooh, it takes a lot to turn my stomach after as many years as
I'm
I've been doing this.
sure. Oh gosh.
I walked into the prep room, I'm like, that smells too close to food.
Oh my
No.
God. Oh no.
No.
So those products exist. There's
They do.
different ones by different manufacturers. But what about glutaraldehyde?
Well, glutaraldehyde is still an aldehyde.
Mhm.
So it is
Why
still
why is it billed as better than formaldehyde
because of the
or
flashpoint.
better than?
Because
Okay.
of the flashpoint. So formaldehyde has a high flashpoint, right?
Yep.
Or I'm sorry, a low flashpoint.
Yeah.
So as it goes through the system, it goes from liquid to vapor pretty quick. You know, at room temperature, it
Yeah.
wants to be a gas. Whereas glutaraldehyde doesn't vaporize as much, doesn't produce as much vapor. So as we're putting it through the system, it's still acting like formaldehyde. It's still attaching to the protein in the system. It's just not off-gassing as quickly. But that doesn't mean it's better, Faith.
Right.
It does not mean it's better.
Well, it doesn't mean it's better. It's doesn't mean that it works better necessarily in the body for the preservation and disinfection of the body.
But it's not even healthier.
But it's not right. But what the appeal to it is, or what the perceived benefit is that there's not as much vapors and not as much risk to the practitioner.
Sure, sure. But let's go a little bit further. There are plenty of chemicals that offer preservative qualities that do not include all of this risk. And it's a matter of training ourselves to understand what that looks like instead of expecting the formaldehyde result
Right.
out of what we get.
Yep.
So ethyl alcohol,
Mhm.
it's a great preservative. It really is. And it preserves via precipitation and dehydration.
Right.
But if you get the right combination, the right dilution, you get the preservation without the other added issue, which is at a certain concentration, it becomes a lipid solvent.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so you don't want your lipids breaking down while your protein is being preserved.
No,
No.
you certainly don't.
Decomposing fat is probably one of the worst smelling things in existence.
Oh yeah.
But you get that proper concentration. You get preservation. Ask me how I know.
How do you know? But
Um,
we have to remember that it's temporary preservation we're going for in the
absolutely,
first place. So
absolutely.
to have something that that give it may not give us the result as using a formaldehyde or something else, but is that not okay if our goal is temporary preservation?
Absolutely. It's 100% okay.
Right.
Now, with with formaldehyde, we are accustomed to a certain level of firmness.
Right.
And there are a number of service embalmers, myself included, who look at the preservation that we get. And with a lot of our cases, we really want to rock them,
Hmm.
so to speak,
Yeah.
because we don't know when that service is going to
Right.
be. We want to make sure that they're going to last as long as possible.
I was taught if you
The
can't knock
appropriate.
on their abdomen like this, they're
Mhm.
not well embalmed.
Right.
That's how we were taught.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's not really the case because let's be totally clear on this. Funeral home embalming is not totally embalmed.
No,
It's not.
no.
It is cosmetically embalmed, and that is completely different. If you look at the world of anatomical embalming,
Mhm.
those donors are hanging around sometimes 5 years or
Oh,
longer.
years, yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
think we get ours here for I think we get 3 years or something out of the
right.
ones we get,
Mhm.
yeah.
And some of the organs and tissues that are kept can be around for decades.
Mhm.
All right. So, how is that happening? Well, the complete and thorough embalming of a body also includes quite a bit swelling,
Mhm.
and that's not aesthetically pleasing. So,
Right.
we don't do it.
Yeah.
But is the firming part aesthetically pleasing? Well, not really. It makes our job a little bit easier as
Yeah.
far as being able to, work with features, do restoration, things like that.
Mhm.
But when you walk up and you touch grandma's hand and it's cold and it's stiff,
Mhm.
that's not aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
Ethanol does something where the preservation process doesn't firm quite the same way that formaldehyde does.
Mhm.
So using an ethanol based fluid will give you more pliability with a very similar amount of preservation.
Mhm.
But the things that you're looking for during the embalming process are
Mhm.
very, very different.
Sure.
Can't look for the firming. You can't look for
Mhm.
that orange peel skin.
Huh?
Um, the color change, you've got to utilize more in terms of dyes
Mhm.
and cosmetic embalming
Yeah, I mean,
methods.
changing one thing can change everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And we have become as embalmers accustomed to certain things.
Mhm,
We just have. And
mhm,
so part of the resistance to change or the resistance to add additional options for families
mhm,
for that purpose, I think it makes us uncomfortable because we don't feel like we know if that body's preserved or not if we don't have those things.
right,
So instead of saying we can do traditional embalming with, formaldehyde and whatever, however, whatever, all the way down to eco-friendly preparation of completely unembalmed remains and everything in between.
mhm,
We're comfortable with these two, but we're not comfortable in between because
right,
we don't know what to expect and we don't know how to tell it. We feel we don't know how to tell if a body is properly preserved unless we
mm.
have this result.
Well, and Faith, that is a little bit on us.
Yeah.
The 2 of us have been in mortuary education for a while,
Mhm.
and, what do we teach our students outside of the use of aldehydes?
Mhm.
We touch on the fact that these chemicals have these capabilities,
Uh-huh.
but think about your time in college.
Oh,
You
never
were
heard of it.
taking that information that was
Yeah.
immediately
Yeah.
necessary
Yeah.
for what you're doing, and the theoretical stuff really
Mhm.
wasn't as important because when you walk into the funeral home, you're not gonna see
You're
that.
not gonna and I can't honestly, I could be wrong, please don't come for me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall being taught much whatsoever about other methods of preservation when I was in
Right.
mortuary school. I'm fairly sure we didn't touch on that. And if we did, it was a paragraph.
Right.
And it may be different now in some places, and that's great. But, for us, we weren't taught that there were options or that they were something that were frequently used. So you have a whole generations of embalmers out there that have never used these things. And and some are just against it for whatever reasons, but I think a lot of us, myself included, are afraid because I don't want to mess up somebody's mom because I wanted to see what happened with this fluid, you know?
And that is an important distinction right there, is we're not really in a place to
We
experiment.
can't experiment. Yeah, what are we going to do? Every person we work on in our work is somebody's loved one.
Right.
We can't say, and we can't say, well, I know you wanted direct cremation, but do you mind if we try this thing first? We can't do that. I mean, I suppose we could if we got all the right permissions. Nobody wants to, though. Nobody wants to ask families for permission to experiment on their loved one before cremation to see what happens with this like, have that, you know what I mean? Ask your boss if you can do that. They'll say no. But I really do think that a big part of it, on the embalmers out there now, myself included, is just fear because we don't have trial and error. We get to try this stuff and we've never used it before, and we're trying it on somebody's loved one, and that's a big risk and a big
It absolutely
responsibility that
is.
we don't want the liability of it not going well or it not doing what we hope it does.
Absolutely. Which is why it is so important that as a mortuary college, we allow some of that
Mm,
in our environment.
yeah.
That is an environment where a student can make a
Mhm.
mistake.
Yeah.
That is an environment where we can try a new method. That
Mhm.
is an environment where we need to encourage and foster
Mhm.
research and creativity,
Yeah.
because if we don't, we can't expect it to happen in the field.
No, and I love that you bring that up because that is something that we fail so miserably at in funeral service education is furthering research
Mhm.
and doing those things, with our students. We just
Absolutely.
get in the mode. We got to teach them how to embalm, sing, go get jobs and embalm, and we don't ever try
Right.
anything outside the curriculum. We don't ever really get involved in any real research on these things when we have the tools and all of the things really to do so if we wanted to,
Mhm.
because our main concern is teaching them how to embalm competently enough that when they get a job, we don't get a call from their boss. What in the hell's the matter with you guys over there? They don't know, you know? So, I
We're
mean,
gonna get those calls
seriously.
anyway.
Yeah. You know what I mean, though? Like, it doesn't even enter our heads as a possibility for, whether it's time, whether it's materials, whatever it is,
Mhm.
um, that would be a place, to do that.
And full disclosure, I am a consultant for a company called Green Solutions Group
Mhm,
that has a non-toxic embalming fluid.
mhm,
I've worked with them for quite some time, and I helped them come up with the protocol on how to actually use these
mhm,
fluids, all of
mhm,
the application protocol. So I am a little biased,
uh-huh,
but the entire way that I got involved with this company to begin with was they approached me at the college.
mhm,
They said, "Do you want to try it?" And I had already tried the essential oil fluids,
mhm.
and really, really, really had to work hard to get that smell out of my prep room. So I had some reservations, if not for anything other than just olfactory
Yeah.
reservation. But I was like, you know what? It's a college.
Yeah.
And one of look at the mission statement of most of these programs, look at the program objectives.
Mhm,
And right in there is furthering research and
mhm.
knowledge in funeral service and
Yeah.
embalming. And I'm like, well, if we're not doing that, we're not meeting
Yeah.
our program objectives.
Mhm.
So in the name of science,
Yeah.
let's go. Um, and the first time I tried it was an absolute disaster, because the application protocol, the folks that were packaging things were speaking a different language than we were
Okay.
speaking.
Mm.
So they didn't understand the equivalencies that they
How
were.
to give directions
Right.
and yeah.
Right. So when we're talking about index, you're like, well, this is similar to an X index.
Okay.
Well, okay, but that teaches me how to use formaldehyde. That doesn't do
Mhm.
any good
Mhm.
teaching me how to use this
Yeah.
particular. And but once we figured that out, and once we figured out that there was a certain um, dilution that
Mhm.
we had to use in order for it to work correctly,
Yeah.
because we did get those donors with the adipose tissue, the lipid solvency. It was not pretty. It was
Yeah.
not pretty. But once we figured that out, we realized, hey, this really works.
Mhm.
And they're working right now a good portion in the anatomical fields,
Mhm.
both with human and animal preservation,
Mhm.
but still trying to work with the funeral industry. But the funeral industry just trying to adopt something like that, it goes right back to, I'm not going to try it out on someone's mom
Yeah.
and have it go wrong.
Yeah.
And so there are limited ways
To
for funeral
perfect it and
directors.
to yeah,
Sure. And
sure.
how are they going to learn? How are you going to switch them from a toxic chemical to a non-toxic chemical when they don't have any way to practice it
Yeah.
themselves?
Yeah.
And we're taking the embalming component out of the schools and putting it in the funeral homes,
Yeah.
so they're never going to be able to
Right.
practice.
Yeah.
And that's something, way off topic, but it's something that we really need to consider in
Sure.
our education.
Well, we need our and there's the single purpose schools, the public schools, the private schools. There's all kinds of different school systems that mortuary colleges are a part of.
Mhm.
And part of that is, funding and all of those things.
Yeah.
And so for my program, we don't have a lab here. We
Mhm.
have a demo station like we're supposed to be accredited, but our embalming clinicals are taught at a care center
Yeah.
on people's real mom and dads.
Yeah.
So we don't, even if I wanted to, which I'd love to, we don't have the opportunity to do those kinds of things because we don't have our own lab with donors that have been donated for educational purposes, or even any of those things that we can do. We are teaching our students on real decedents who have services the next day,
Sure. Sure.
you know?
And if we want embalming to continue in this industry,
Mhm.
that's got to change.
Well, we have to care about schools,
We
honestly.
do. And the
And
quality of the education that the students are getting.
yeah, and we have to be willing to donate to schools or to do those things. And it seems like I don't know what it is about our industry. Gosh, we're so messed up in so many ways. Like everybody just graduates and then they forget about they don't, it's
Where's our legacy
yeah,
donation?
right. Well, you got to make money first to do that, but theoretically, I mean, there's corporations, there's all these, companies out there, these large companies that are donating to different things, but why aren't they investing in the schools or the education aspect of it, in ways that would be meaningful to support a better, more comprehensive, education, especially around preservation.
Mhm.
Because, like I said earlier, it seems like you're either completely traditional or you're way completely to the other side and there's nothing in the middle, but this is where we need to be. We need to create a middle. And what that looks like to me is a funeral home that can offer a traditional formaldehyde embalming and ship your mom to where another country, whatever, who can meet whatever standard of preservation is necessary for that case. And if
Mhm.
if they want that person to be fully embalmed, traditionally embalmed, I'll say, for whatever reasons that the funeral home can do that. But also we can do something in the middle.
Right.
Maybe they want some preparation, but not all.
Right.
And right now our options is embalm or no. Those are it. And why can't we say something? I learned this, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. I learned this from Monica Torres. I did a class with her, and she has a document that's really great. It's preparation of remains, and it includes all these different things that you can talk about with families to do exactly this, some but maybe not all. So maybe in maybe this case, as a professional and having, done my analysis of the body, and the family wants to view,
Mhm.
but but they don't want to embalm, but there are things with the body that I know would be better with certain things. Well, we could aspirate perhaps.
Exactly,
We
exactly.
could maybe only aspirate and maybe some cavity fluid and not arterially embalm, because they want to see that person, tomorrow, and that's it. But they've got things happening
Right.
that we can mitigate with maybe just part of the process. But right now we don't do that. We will either have to embalm them or we do nothing. And there's this whole big world in between where we can really meet different families' needs and wants
Mhm.
with some of this, some of that, and some of the other. And we're not willing to do that, and I'm not sure why, other than just fear.
Well, we also have to listen to the rest of the industry. Now, Jewish funeral homes have been working without embalming ever since the dawn of Judaism.
Right?
And they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Oh, there's utilization of dry ice. There are lots of
Mhm.
methods to be
Yeah.
able to view someone
Uh-huh.
without embalming.
Yeah.
And it's been happening for much longer than any of us have been around or will be around.
Yeah.
So, we have to stop looking at it like if embalming doesn't happen, nobody can see this body. It's the end of the world. You know, no, it isn't. It isn't.
Yeah.
There was a long time before embalming came around, and
Yeah.
there is also a movement. The UK, for example,
Sure.
is in the process of banning formaldehyde.
Hmm. Yeah.
And right now they are scaling it down. And I know this because I'm working with some medical colleges over there
Hmm.
right now
Yeah.
that are in a little bit of a panic. Like, we can't embalm our donors the way they need to be embalmed at the concentration that is allowed for
Yeah.
formaldehyde currently. So what
Sure.
do we do? Well, there we go. We've got, these non-toxic
Yeah.
solutions, and we need to put more time and effort into developing those.
We absolutely do. And we have to, I think we have to be willing to, even just on the funeral home level, we have to be willing to educate our students that way, and
Absolutely.
not indoctrinate them into this way, which
Mhm.
happens in some places. It still does.
Sure,
I'm sorry.
sure.
And we're not doing a good job of that, I don't think. And green, alternative preparation methods or whatever it is shouldn't be two paragraphs at the back of the book. It should
No,
be that could be a whole class, in my opinion, or a whole seminar on those things. And we don't do that. And well, some of us do it in addition to, but it's not currently part of the curriculum in any meaningful way where
but
you
it's
can,
also difficult to get anything extra
yeah.
into an associate level
Hmm.
degree that's already
It is.
so packed full of
Yeah,
things that are well above and beyond associate level.
I agree. I agree with that too.
Hmm.
But I do think I think that's the way, is to offer everything, not
Sure.
to go, this is a traditional funeral home. If you want this or this, we don't do that, or whatever. Um, and not and be able to offer different levels of preparation, different methods, different things. And some funeral homes really are trying and are doing a good job. But I still think most of the industry has it's either embalmed or not. That's it.
Right,
And
right,
there's
right.
nothing in between, and there's so much in between
There
that can
is.
happen. And
And I
that's
hate to say
unfortunate.
this, but there's a monetary consideration here.
Well, there is, however, what if we, so I'm going to open my own funeral home in my head. In my head, I got all the problems solved. So just wait. I can solve everything in my fake scenario,
Right.
my fake funeral home where everything's perfect. So, but what if and again, we have to deal with things like embalming disclosures, all these things. So there's a lot more to it. But what if instead of we had embalming, we just had preparation of deceased? $5.95, $8.9, whatever our charge is, and that includes whatever of these options, maybe it's a traditional embalming, full
Mhm.
traditional embalming. Maybe it's some of this, some of that, maybe it's whatever, but we just charge for preparation of the deceased,
Mhm.
and whatever that means, it's the same. It's preparation.
I would agree to that. I think that that's a really great method.
Yeah.
It kind of goes along with weird comparison, but like health insurance think
Yeah.
where everybody pays this premium and
Hmm.
this person may use it more, this person may use it less,
Yeah.
but it equals out. The
And I
the
think,
cost is spread.
yeah, and let's be real, if we're going to talk about it from that perspective, families don't know what goes into embalming,
Sure.
and they don't, and many of them don't want to, and that's okay. But I think that as we can say that just as much time and labor goes into preparing unembalmed remains often than embalmed remains. And so I
Absolutely.
feel there's a business case and a justification to be made for not having such a huge difference in price between an embalming and
We
preparation
we
of
do it with the
remains.
standard service charge.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have our overhead fee,
Hmm.
which is services of funeral director and staff.
Yeah.
And regardless of what you select, you pay that overhead fee.
Hmm.
And really, it should be the same way in the prep room.
That's my whole, that's it, right? But then we have to consider, well, it's currently one of the things that have to be itemized embalming, we have to have some bigger changes to really be able to do that. I mean, we could have embalming and then preparation, other methods, the same price. We could do that now, but I still feel like that makes this delineation, when you have two things next to each other, that they're not equal,
Right.
in people's minds, just consumer psychology. So I don't know how well that would go, but I mean, that would have to result in changes to GPL compliance and all of that to be able to do what
Right.
I'm suggesting. But I do think that, if we, if we're putting on our price list, embalming, I don't know, I'm just 8.95, whatever,
Mhm.
and other preparation is 195, we are creating this
We
difference.
are.
This is all meaningless. These are numbers that we're making up.
Sure.
So I can have embalming be 8.95, and preparation of unembalmed be 8.55 if I want,
Mhm.
and we're afraid to do that. But I think we forget that we have to be the leaders, and we have to do these things if we want them to change.
Absolutely.
Families aren't going to come in and go, well, I want to pay the same amount for this than that, because they're really not that much little, there's very similar, and they're not going to do that. But if you price your things that way, um, that
We create that
we
expectation.
create that expectation. Yes.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to back that up by be willing to do the things, of course, but you know, but it's
Well,
entirely possible to
what
do
about
that.
what about the burial side of this? What about green burial facilities,
Hmm.
the requirements
Hmm.
of casketing or
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
casketing? What about that
So
aspect?
yeah, I mean, I think that cemeteries will create their own requirements. Some cemeteries will have a portion of their cemetery that allows for no outer burial container and all of those things,
Mhm.
and others won't. And that's going to be location based. So you can, if there's the Green Burial Council, which will certify a cemetery
Right,
if it meets certain conditions. Again, this is not some official thing that you have to do or not do, but
right.
if you want to go the extra step and be certified by Green Burial Council, you have to meet these requirements to call yourself these things under their logo.
It's like a certified funeral service professional.
Absolutely. So if you want to be a hybrid burial ground, you're a conventional cemetery that offers the option for burial without an outer bar and either without a outer burial container or just an inverted. Okay,
Right,
so nothing on the ground level. And so they're not required to be embalmed, and you have to allow for any kind of eco-friendly container,
right.
including a shroud. Okay, so that's hybrid. If you want to be a natural burial ground, you have to also have protocols in place that are energy conserving, minimizing waste, do not
Mm.
require the use of chemicals. So it's a little bit more than just what you allow to be put in the ground. It's how you're operating as a facility and as a business too.
Right.
And then conservation burial grounds have to go even farther and be, legitimately conserving land, protecting it, perpetual care, all of those things. So
Mhm.
those things exist. If a cemetery wanted to pursue them, they would have to meet those requirements to call themselves that under that, Green Burial Council name. But I mean, how many there's Jewish cemeteries in or sections in cemeteries. And I mean, I know one here does not require they have to have an inverted, but
Right.
they don't have to necessarily have the concrete against the ground. The
Mhm.
casket can go directly onto the ground and then the vault can go over it. We also have to, when we're talking about this, all these green things, we have to become okay with greener.
Mhm.
We have to start there. And I think that,
Middle
you know,
ground.
the fear of our industry of the traditionalist is that we're just going to go way to this other extreme and everything's going to be lost that we've done. And it's not. We're not saying that. You can be greener, right? And offer greener options without having, I mean, you don't have to go the complete opposite end of the spectrum either to reduce your impact and to offer those things to families, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we have to be
And
careful with that.
let's think about the motivation behind it to begin with. Nobody's doing this to save money.
Yeah.
Nobody's doing it because, it's a fad. They're
Mhm.
doing it because they're honestly concerned
Mm.
about the impact of the things that they purchase, the services that they utilize.
Mhm.
And it's important for us to respect that. As I was going through college, my father, who is an environmental biologist,
Uh-huh.
told me, hollow out an oak tree and just roll me into the swamp. He's
My
telling
dad used to want to go in a hefty bag in the backyard.
you know, but the tree will break down. I hated to tell him that the swamp is probably going to cause natural mummification,
Right.
but um, there's something to be said for the segment of the population that really, really connects with that.
Well,
With
yeah.
I don't want the pomp and circumstance. I
And
want to
it
go
doesn't
back to
even
nature.
mean that. That doesn't even mean that.
Mhm.
We are putting meaning on people that it doesn't necessarily mean. So I have heard so many funeral directors go, well, they don't care about ritual and service. All they're telling you is they want to be buried naturally. They're
Sure,
not saying they don't want services. They're not saying there's no ritual involved. But we assume that they mean they want nothing and they don't value any kind of
that's not true.
ritual or ceremony, and that's not it at all. It just may look different, but that doesn't mean that it's not there.
Have you seen some of the photos of the green burial services where,
Yes, yes, they're
people are bringing
beautiful.
natural wildflowers
Mhm.
and you've got this beautiful wicker casket,
Yeah.
hand lowering
Mm-hmm.
instead of using lowering
Mm-hmm.
devices, things of that nature,
Yeah.
which if you look at the intention behind having a funeral, tends to hit a little deeper
It
in my
absolutely is.
opinion.
But
Um,
we have as
the
professionals,
participation.
yeah, somewhere along the way as professionals, we have married ritual and meaning to the physical body and what happens to it. We have married what makes funeral service meaningful and the ritual involved with it to the disposition of the body.
Right.
And it doesn't belong there
No.
because you can have a full service and the whole works for somebody whose body was never found.
Yeah,
And we forget
absolutely.
that. So we have to mentally divorce the two, that whatever happens to the physical body is immaterial to the services, ritual, and memorialization and all of that a family can have. And
Yeah.
families don't realize this. And if you're willing to tell them that, I mean, they come in assuming, well, we just want direct cremation. That's it. How many families don't even realize all that means is that's that's the end part, but what about all this? And it's the same with natural burial and other alternative disposition methods. It means nothing about the services or what we can provide or lead them through or, provide to them because of what they're doing with the physical body.
And let's look at this aspect when you're looking at families who choose immediate cremation
Mhm.
or immediate dispositions. Why are they doing it? Is it always financial? Because
No, but
I
here's
don't
one,
think it is.
I maintain this, and somebody can challenge me if they want. I maintain this. Every family has some sort of ritual. We may not see it.
Of
So we
course,
cannot go, okay, well, they wanted immediate burial or immediate cremation. They don't value ritual and blah, 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 blah.
not the case.
Maybe that idea that they do is their service, is their ritual. Maybe they do, and maybe they do something that we're not involved in and we don't see. That we,
Maybe they get the whole family
yeah,
together and they do shots all night
maybe they
honoring their
do.
loved one.
Yeah, but I do maintain that I believe that every family has does some sort of
They do.
something.
They
They
do.
really do. And just because we don't see it or it's not what we think it should be doesn't mean they don't value those things. It just means that they do it differently.
But that also means that when that family walks in the door, you don't talk to them like they just want cremation.
Right.
You don't talk to them like they just want immediate burial or
Mhm.
they just want ABC, because the more you treat them like they're wasting your time, the more they don't want a thing to do with you.
Yeah.
I've had so many families that have come in and requested cremation,
Yeah.
and just simply asking them, what do you plan to do? Can I help you with register books? Can
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
help you with stands, things like that? There's always something that we can do to let that family know that they still matter to us,
Hmm.
and it's not about the money coming in. And that's how funeral directors get that reputation of being money grabbers,
It is.
is that when someone chooses a service that isn't as expensive as we think it might have to be, whether they realize it or not, some practitioners treat those clients differently,
Hmm.
and treating them differently is going to turn into a self-fulfilled bias or self-fulfilled
Oh,
prophecy.
absolutely. How many times on social media and other things do you see funeral directors talking about nobody cares about tradition and ritual anymore and da 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 da. And it look I don't think that's true. I think people still care about those things. I think it just looks different now.
I
That's
do
all.
too.
And
Yeah,
we have to change how we do that. We can't force them into a mold that doesn't fit anymore because it's what we think it should be. And
just
then
like
blame them for not caring
uh,
about these things. They do, it just looks different.
just like every other industry.
Yeah.
Look at the Pope. Catholicism is changing,
Well,
and if Catholicism can change, then heavens, funeral service can.
I've had funeral. I told my class this morning, so I want to be composted.
Mhm.
I think it's cool and something for me about knowing it's almost like my body just doesn't exist anymore, which I don't that's I mean that's kind of true, but something about that I really like because I don't want to be like just buried in the ground somewhere forever. I don't want to be like just remains that who whatever, I don't know what. Nothing's that meaningful to me for my physical body to have to exist in some format somewhere. So to
Yes.
me composting is awesome because I don't have to exist as a dead body in any form after
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And I've had so many funeral directors say to me, how can you be a funeral director? How can you be a program chair of a mortuary school and want to be composted? Like I'm betraying the profession because what I want to do. And I'm just like, what about any of that said to you that I don't value funeral service or that I'm not
Right.
the right person to teach it? Like that's a leap,
Big jump.
But we do that to
No,
families is the point.
we do. We do. And, I want to be donated.
Mhm.
I have over
But
my
what about
career.
permanent memorialization? You need to be in a cemetery. Your family has to have somewhere to,
Do they?
do
Do
they?
they?
I don't know. Maybe
I, with me, my entire career has been based off of the gifts of others.
sure.
Donors who decided that it was important that I learn. And then moving forward, donors that decided that it was important that I had the materials to teach others.
Yeah.
And the entire reason that I've been able to teach and have some amazing students come out of the programs that I've worked with is because of those
Yeah.
gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in medical schools I've worked for
Mm-hmm.
and mortuary colleges I've worked
Yeah.
for. It's everywhere. Those donations are so important. And I figure if I have worked on literally thousands of donors, take me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm not doing anything with it when I'm gone. So
Right.
go ahead,
Yeah.
learn what you can. And it's not necessarily the learning of new information. It's the training of the individuals who need to understand the information we
Oh, yeah.
already have.
Sure. But I mean, how many funeral directors would say to us that how can how can you not value this, you know, or how can you be funeral directors and not want traditional? You have to set an example and all these things. And I'm like, I said I wanted my body to be composted. I didn't say I didn't want a funeral. I didn't say I wasn't going to have a ritual. I didn't say I wasn't going to be memorialized somewhere. All I said was I want my physical body to be composted. But you went as far as to think that I don't want anything other than that, and I never said that.
You can be a professional skeet shooter and still be a vegan.
There you go. Yes. Yes.
You know, it works. It
I
works.
just the I'm happy to be living in a time in funeral service where these things are being talked about and people are willing to push the envelope for it and to keep going for it. I'm glad to be alive. I'm happy to be alive at this time. But I am, because if I were 30 years older, 20 years older, I would have that wouldn't have been the case. You know what I mean? Or if I were whatever. I think it's an interesting time in funeral service. I think the students are at one of the most transformative times in death care that's existed in our life,
Absolutely.
in funeral service as an industry. I'll say it that way, right? So since we started embalming, period, when have we had such a transformation in death care? We haven't. I think this is it. Like this is
I agree.
our second time around. I don't know how I'm trying to say it, but I really think that it's the most meaningful and transformative time in death care. And what's going to happen over the next 10 years is going to change our industry significantly. And I think it's really cool to be able to be a part of that through how we educate our students and the things that we're willing to do ourselves as practitioners. So it's really cool, but it still makes me sad when I'm on social media or when I'm on whatever to see how many people just can't let others be.
Yeah.
Who cares if you want to be traditionally embalmed and drug around in a whatever for 9 days and go on the train and be taken, whatever you want to do, cool. uh, you know, if I want to be composted, what's wrong with that? Like but again, we have to attack each other and say, well, if you want to be composted, well, you still drive a car, you still do all these things. We have to get okay with greener. We have to get okay with greener and not try to say, well, you're either all or nothing.
Right. I agree. And none of us is ever going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be some type of hypocrisy somewhere in our lives. It doesn't mean that doing better isn't an improvement.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't, which is exactly what you're getting to.
Yeah.
So I think that in our show notes, we should probably post links to Champion for
Okay.
their green embalming
Yep.
chemicals,
Mm-hmm.
Green Solutions Group for
Okay.
their embalming chemicals, because we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned those, and then the Green Burial Commission
Yeah. Green Burial Council. Yep.
or Council, yeah, Green
Yeah.
Burial Council, so that if someone is interested in green burial, you can understand those different classifications.
Understand what those terms mean and also
Absolutely.
understand that you don't have to be Green Burial Council approved or certified to offer these things. But
Right.
if you want the designation as having done, all these things, then that's what it's there for.
Mhm.
But
It's
yeah,
like the accreditation of a school.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we can put that or the show notes. I'll figure out
Yeah.
how to do that. But
So today we are sponsored by Good Judy Garage.
we are
Faith, go ahead and do a little plug.
Uh, Good Judy Garage is Denver's only openly queer-owned and operated auto shop. I won't say we're the only owned, but we're the only openly owned and operated queer auto shop in the Denver metro area. We've been around 2 years now. It has been a wild and exciting ride, and um, we're just so fortunate to have such a wonderful community that allows us to have a business here that, that we can provide for them. So that's it. That's my shop. What about you? What's the other sponsor?
Other sponsor is Rotabon Mortuary Education and Consulting, which is me.
Yeah.
For the right price, I will come and yap at anybody. I will take up your entire afternoon if you
Oh
want
my
me
gosh.
to. So yeah, we do expert witness work, we do technical work, service embalming, and just standard consulting. So any needs,
Yeah.
we are here. And if you are interested in sponsorship for this program, you can do one episode, you can do a season, it's completely open. Faith, what do they do?
Yeah, just send us an email and we'll talk about it. I mean, we're open to all kinds of different opportunities there for that. And also, if you have any questions about anything we've talked about, or if you have any suggestions for topics or anything you really
Yeah,
want to hear about, send that to us in an email. And then on our next episode, if there's been any questions or any things in the email, we will address them so that we actually are listening to you. But
absolutely. And that email address is momticians
mhm.
at gmail.com.
Yep.
Nothing else, just momticians. So,
Competitions. Hmm.
all right, Faith, it has been an awesome chat today.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's always fun. And make good choices, everybody.
Make good
Make good
choices.
choices. We'll see you next time.
Thanks.